and welcome to the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce Government Division webinar. Thank you for taking time today to participate in this event. My name is Christopher Breaux, and I'm the Division Chair for the Fort Bend Chamber's Government Division. The Fort Bend Chamber is the only 5-star accredited chamber in the greater Houston region. As the advocate for excellence in Fort Bend County and beyond, the Chamber serves both our business partners and our community. Let's recognize our sponsors for this webinar, Hewlett-Zollars, Memorial Hermann, and Global Fuels Limited. We have Greg Wine with Hewlett-Zollars. Greg, would you like to say a few words?
Just briefly, and thanks, Chris. Hewlett-Zollars, we're a full-service architectural and engineering firm, been working for all entities throughout Fort Bend County and the region for over 30 years, and we just appreciate the opportunity to support the Chamber on this event. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. We have Ashlea Quinonez from Memorial Hermann. Ashlea, would you like to say a few words?
Certainly. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity to sponsor, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to support our chamber any opportunity that we can. Just real briefly, I just wanted to take just a second to obviously thank Senator Kolkhorst for her longtime support of various healthcare issues that we worked on with her and her team and at the state legislative level. And also want to just thank the community during this time. Obviously, this has been an unprecedented time for our healthcare systems serving Fort Bend County, and the support that we've received from the community, specifically the city of Sugar Land and others, has just been absolutely incredible. So thank you for that. And in that same vein, if there's ever an opportunity for us to support other businesses in the community, we are always to be a resource to do so. We've learned a lot in this process in terms of safety and face-to-face interaction, and having our employees be able to provide their services in a very environment. So if we can ever be a resource to anybody else in that space, we would love to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashlea, and thank you, Greg, and also a big thanks to U.S. Global Fuels for being one of our sponsors today. We appreciate all you folks do to support the Chamber of Commerce. Now, folks in the audience, remember the chat feature. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them at the bottom of your screen in the chat dialog box, and we'll address those questions after the Senator concludes her presentation. At this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Lois Kolkhorst, who represents nearly 1 million constituents in Senate District 18, which spans 21 counties. She serves as the chair of the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, the Senate Committee on Nominations, which vets and confirms government appointees nominated by Governor Abbott. Senator Kolkhorst is a member of the Senate Committee on Water and Rural Affairs, the Texas Agricultural Policy Board, the State Water Implementation Fund for the Texas Advisory Council, the Texas Windstorm Insurance Oversight Board, and the influential Senate Finance Committee. And that has got to be one heck of a business card that she's dealing with there. In her spare time, she comes to visit us on Zoom. Senator Kolkhorst, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and it's great to be with Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce and the great folks in Fort Bend County. I was there on Tuesday night, I believe it was, and got to visit with a number of people. And this new virtual world that we live in, it was good to be back face to face with people. Carrie, thank you for you and your team and what y'all have done throughout the pandemic, but long before the pandemic, of being a champion for our businesses. I used to be an old chamber executive, and so I know what chambers of commerce do, and they're extremely important to the success of our community. So with that, I say thank you. I laugh about my Zoom calls because I think that it ages me 20 years. So I just want y'all to know, maybe it's the pandemic or maybe it's the Zoom, but I'm having to get my hair dyed more often than every 5 weeks now. I'm down to about 3.5 weeks because of what the last 7 months have done. So Carrie and her team kind of ask how COVID will change the 2021 legislative session. cover things like flood mitigation, schools, healthcare, transportation funding, a lot of different things. So let's just start with the I don't know, 1 trillion pound gorilla in the room, which is the pandemic, the global pandemic that we are continuing to endure, but see great promise in things that are coming. So quickly, I'm just going to touch on the gratefulness that I have for your community leaders. During the pandemic, I would set up conference calls with and I included all of our state reps. I would do the Fort Bend County mayors. I would do all county judges in Senate District 18. As Mr. Breaux explained, I go all the way down to Port Aransas. So to get to part of Senate District 18, you literally have to get onto a boat to get there and get to the ferry and go across there. And so it's a very expansive district. Your mayors in Fort Bend County were awesome. It was always one of my favorite phone calls, was to visit with the mayors in Fort Bend County. And I will just tell you that you don't have any fading violets that are in those offices right now. They were the most lively group. And the reason I did Fort Bend County mayors and then all other mayors in Senate District 18 was, again, Fort Bend County being a little more unique, a large county that I only represent half of. And so, I was trying to split it up kind of north-south in the district. But I just want you to know that there was absolute great input from all of them. And many times what I would take is my notes and then forward it on to the governor's task force on things like childcare, reopening restaurants. I know Mayor Zimmerman and I would have those calls, and then we'd have a lot of offline calls as well. So I appreciate their leadership and certainly things that the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce has done as well. So let me just jump into some of the numbers. As y'all know that deaths are declining and hospitalizations are declining, and our positivity rate for the first time since early June has dropped below 10%. That's all good news. The bad news is that it's been real hard getting what I believe are numbers that the public trust. And I share that as chair of Health and Human Services. Data is one of the most important things that any policymaker uses to make good decisions. And so it's been choppy at best. You've seen some data dumps recently where we've had some backlogs. In part, we are utilizing for the first time ever to this extent private labs. How those are reported to the Department of State Health Services has varied. Something I've learned through this pandemic, for example, is you take your Fort Bend County Health Authority, and the way that they report their data to the state is basically our systems don't talk. So they have to upload daily, basically, their information to the Department of State Health Services. These are many things that we need to be able to change going into next session. That will be one of my focuses as I work as chair of Health and Human Services, is to make sure that we have good data. Hospitals, I don't know, Memorial Hermann is on today. Appreciate their partnership. I've had some of their best, and I call them scientists, who have been on conference calls with me about the pandemic and about the science of the pandemic. But, there were times when we didn't really fully understand capacity of hospitals and, what the COVID count was, and each hospital counting it slightly differently. So there was a lot of confusion. As Texans, we made it through, and I believe that we're on the other side of the river in a positive way. That doesn't mean we can let our guards down. We know that COVID-19 is a highly contagious virus. There are indications from some scientists that say maybe it's less viral. We're getting better at the treatment of it. Man, I'll tell you, some of these great doctors, when I've been on the conference calls with them, talking about the length of stay in the hospitals, what we saw in New York, the use of, the practice of not using ventilators, trying to get to the ambulatory stage of COVID-19. I speak a little bit with experience. So in our own family, Jake, our 17-year-old son, who's a senior at Brenham High School this year. He was the first to get COVID-19 in July. Jimmy got it, middle-aged male, and I'll tell all middle-aged males on this call that for some reason men don't fight off COVID as well as women, and that's a proven fact. I read a great scientific story about 3 a.m. this morning about that in one of the journals. And so, and then Lois Kate tested positive for COVID-19 last week. She's a senior at TCU in Fort Worth. So she is 2 days out of her tomorrow is the end of her 10-day quarantine. She's a TCU cheerleader, so pretty important for her to get back on the field. Our experience has been in our family, both Jake and Lois Kate did great with it. Lois Kate's had the influenza the last 2 seasons while she's been in college, and in her words, "Mom, this is nothing compared to the influenza." But on the flip side of that, Jimmy did not do great with it. About 7-8 days into it, knowing what I know and being around, like I said, great doctors and scientists of the world, called our primary care physician and said, you know, we need to start acting. I had a pulse oximeter, and Jimmy was able to get on a nebulizer, budesonide, and then dexamethasone and azithromycin eventually, and really bounced back great. But he would have been the typical guy that would have ended up in the hospital as he had early onset of pneumonia. So great. I mean, not obese, doesn't have any heart problems, not a diabetic, absolutely picture of health, skinny, athletic. But that's the complexity of this disease. We're finding, if you go to the chart on the Department of State Health Services, that you see 55 and over, and Jimmy's 55 and over, account for, gosh, I haven't done the statistics recently, but it's 3/4. I've seen some stories lately that, say, into the 90% of, those populations 55 and above that account for the mortality rate. So we are learning a lot, and I am encouraged that we attack this pandemic in the early stages and prevent people from getting to the hospital. Comorbidity is a huge part of it. That part of the science. I know that many of you might have seen the CDC story this weekend, where of the deaths, nearly 94% had an average of 2.6 comorbidities. That data, you have to be very careful how you interpret that data. But the message is that if you have underlying health you could definitely struggle with this. So kudos and thank you to all of our health workers, our nursing home providers who have been especially hit by COVID-19, the struggles that we have seen there. I am advocating very hard for our nursing homes to continue to open up visitation. Of all the letters that I received, the most heartfelt are from people who have loved ones in nursing homes, some of which they haven't seen since February. And I've really been working with Health and Human Services to find a path forward to allow visitation in some form or fashion, because the mental health aspect of what the pandemic has done to us is great. To that point, a study by the Meadows Mental Health Foundation that's based out of North Texas estimates that for every 5% increase in unemployment rate, we will lose an additional 300 Texans to suicide and 425 to substance abuse. I want to say that your leadership in Sugar Land, Mayor Zimmerman, one of the things that he has really pushed for is the safe opening of businesses. I am with him 100%. It's a good segue into some numbers that I really want y'all to be able to absorb. This was from the Texas Workforce Commission just yesterday morning. Since March 14th, there have been 4.7 million claims, unemployment claims in Texas, $27.2 billion paid out, 16.1 million in federal pandemic assistance, $1.8 billion in pandemic unemployment assistance, which is kind of a non-traditional UI recipient. You know, they allowed people that usually don't get unemployment insurance to be able to apply, like our private contractors, which was important. $658.3 million paid for the PEUC, an extra 13 weeks of unemployment. And then the lost wage assistance paid out $1.1 billion in lost wage assistance. We were the second state to start paying the $300 per week claim. The minimum state benefit to receive additional $300 is $100. So if you only have $75 in benefit, you'll get that adjusted $75 benefit. We will continue all of this until FEMA fund reaches $25 billion. And so it's hard to predict when that is, as more states are coming online and paying the benefits, as well as the natural disaster payouts like from Hurricane Laura. But I will say that we have been very aggressive with the Texas Workforce Commission. I want to give a shout out to some of my staff that have joined us today, like all of you. And I know any of you that have been in the pandemic. I know we have Malesha Patel on, and she talked about the support from the community and how her healthcare providers have given so much. I don't often brag enough on our staff, but we have literally thousands of phone calls in Senate District 18 and thousands of emails in one day. I know Cheryl Tiemann in our district office replied to 248 emails in one day. And that was, I think, important to let people know that they're being heard. We're not perfect. I'm sure we've missed some email along the way. But the other thing that we've tried to do with unemployment claims is to really reach out to those people when they call our office and help them get that unemployment money. And I'll just tell you, I remember getting an email one night and I read it, and you could hear the desperation, and she was from Fort Bend County. I could hear it in her writing. And the very first thing that I did was I called Allison Brock that morning. I emailed her that evening and said, someone from my office will be contacting you. And I called Allison and I said, you know, I really feel like this person is so desperate that they could take their lives. This is the first thing that we're gonna do in the morning. And, you know, we really worked on those kinds of cases. Allison just told me about a case today in Fort Bend County where a gentleman has two daughters. He's really struggling with unemployment. His rental assistance is running out. He is fearful that at the end of this month, he will be evicted. He's tried to apply with Fort Bend County and been told that that money is no longer available. And, you know, so we're gonna keep working on that case by case basis. But I want y'all to know that the economic impacts of the coronavirus and SARS-CoV-2 is long lasting. It will, I mean, it's going to have a long impact on many individuals in our district and throughout our state and nation. So I know Carrie and her team work really hard on the economic side of it, and we just have to keep doing that. So I want to segue into a couple other things about what I think the next session is going to look like, and then I will cover some local issues. I have some notes here, and it's not real pretty on what our state budget will look like. Carrie, I can't remember if after session I addressed the chamber or not, but I know that in many of my speeches in and around the district, I said that I came out of the 2019 session feeling like it was probably the most successful I had ever been a part of as a state rep or a state senator. And following on the heels of Hurricane Harvey and the things that Senate District 18 faced, from Port Aransas, Rockport, Fulton, all the way up to the district, and the flooding that we saw in Fort Bend County, we went into the last legislative session and we went to work. We passed historic bills like House Bill 3, funding for our schools, gave a $5 billion reprieve to our property owners and our homeowners. And you saw that in a way where our property tax rates did drop. Boy, it was an average of 8 to 9 cents across Senate District 18. Of course, House Bill 3 is going to help with the state not taking those high appraisals and taking the money off of them. It's a 2.5% revenue cap on school districts, not the school districts. That means the state has to put more funding in, and we're trying to equal up where it's a 50-50 match instead of the lopsided match that we saw. We put enough money into the formula to help with Robin Hood. There were some real positive things that came out of last session. All to say that I've been in business long enough as a business owner, and I've been a lawmaker long enough to know that good times don't always roll. You have to be cognizant that while it's good today, it might not be. So this morning when I was preparing for the speech, I went for a walk early this morning, and I was thinking about what my speech would have been like in January or February versus today. And in January and February, it literally would have been, we are in a great place. I mean, Texas made major investments in mental health, women's health. We made major investments in our education system. And I would have had this real positive tone, unemployment at an all-time low. And you know, when you say African-American unemployment at its all-time low, Hispanic unemployment, those are things that we can measure since we've kept it. The economy was the hottest that I had ever seen it in my adult lifetime. And then, you know, out of the blue, something that had been talked about for many decades really did happen. And so what does that leave us, and what does it look like today? So my speech would have been completely different. I would have said, you know, we're going to continue to make these great strides. So let me give you some numbers. And I think that we will continue to make great strides. I served in 2003 when we cut $9.9 billion from the budget. I served in 2011 when we cut, you know, I conservatives at least say 12 billion from the budget. Some estimate it more, it was 15 to 20 billion, but real dollars was a little over 12 billion. So Comptroller Hager, our Fort Bend County native, is currently projecting a revenue shortfall of 4.58 billion, which is a decrease from the 2.89 billion surplus. So we almost had a $3 billion surplus that was projected in October of 2019, which would have continued to even get a bigger surplus. So you take away nearly that $3 billion, and then you say we're going to have a $4.5 billion swing. So you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of a $7.5 billion swing in your budget. So you go from being way in the black to in the red. So, you know, to put it in numbers for those of us that are wonky about the budget, he's currently projecting $110.2 billion in GR funds, and it would have been $121.7 billion. I will say that we still have our economic stabilization fund. It separates Texas from the rest of the nation. If y'all will watch some of the talk about the CARES Act right now, and the reasons that maybe they haven't passed it is there is a push by some that want all of us to bail out some states in their pension funds and different things, whereas Texas this last session made investments in their pension funds. We actually put more money into TRS, and we did go into the rainy day fund or the economic stabilization funds, but we did it with one-time funding needs, like putting nearly $700 million into new mental health hospitals, things like that. So we still have a very healthy ESF balance of $8.8 billion, and that's a good deal. So in an area that I work with, and I know Memorial Hermann's on today, and maybe some other of our healthcare providers, the Health and Human Services part of the budget, what we call Article 2, is nearly 40% of all of our spending now. So, you know, you put that in perspective, that's a lot of money, but the governor has instructed that state agencies cut from the current fund 5%. And so that is, including our health agencies. So Health and Human Services is currently projecting that they're going to be able to cut about 132.7 million that will come from attrition of FTEs. We're looking very closely at those cuts because we don't want to move backwards from some of the strides that we made in the last session. As y'all know, the CARES Act is big. The one that, I call it the third bill. There was a fourth bill that was, a plug to the PPP, which I know has been used by a number, a vast majority, or many in Fort Bend County and throughout the state of Texas that helped our businesses. But the CARES Act did give us a bump in our FMAP of 6.2%. Healthcare providers know what that means, but that's going to help out. There was also funding that went from the CARES Act, and it went directly to our healthcare providers, directly to our hospitals. Keep in mind, go way back to March when there was a moratorium on elective surgeries. And then, our hospitals really lost a tremendous amount of revenue. So part of the CARES Act went to fill the coffers of what they were losing. There's been a lot of money that has gone also to our nursing homes through the CARES Act. So all of those are very important that we understand the CARES Act is flowing and did help. I don't predict Congress, and I don't know if there will be a follow-up, but the setting for the next session, the 87th session, will certainly be focused on the budget, and it will certainly be focused on our reaction to the pandemic. So going into the last session, the 86th, I basically said there would be three major issues that we would have to cover, and that was 1, Hurricane Harvey, 2, property taxes, and 3, school funding. And we got all three of those covered. I'll touch in a little bit on some of the things that we did for Hurricane Harvey that'll spin out real big for Fort Bend County eventually. But I do think that the pandemic will absolutely dominate the next session. I've been asked the question, well, what will that look like? Will we be able to come see you, Carrie? Y'all always have a great Fort Bend County Day. I know your staff and your board of directors worked very hard on that. Good gosh, Carrie, where was it? Y'all came to session. Was that in January or was that late fall? Wasn't it in January that we last met and we had Z Tejas where I came and addressed y'all at lunch? Y'all came by and saw one of my hearings. That might have been, I can't remember when that was, and it seems like a lifetime ago. So the question is going to be, how open is the Capitol? The Capitol is shut down right now for 2 reasons, really. One is COVID and, making sure that we keep our staff safe. I want y'all to know that my staff, our staff, your staff, being Senate District 18 staff, did not miss a day going into the office. We never really sheltered at home. We did trade off and didn't have the full staff there, but we felt like, and I have many conference calls with my staff a week, but we just felt like we better serve the people when we were in our offices. And so we would rotate staff in and out. Now we're almost up to a full staff. Everyone feels very safe, but the Capitol to visitors is shut down right now. So my staff never missed a day except for, there were 2 days that it was shut down for cleaning. And then of course, the riots and the vandalism that we saw at the Capitol. So the other reason the Capitol is still shut down is vandalism. The threats against the People's House right now are pretty large. I've had some personal and private conversations with the Department of Public Safety and our executive director there, and they are real. So we're going to have to be vigilant in protecting that property and protecting the people in it. But I do think that we are up to it. And so what does the session look like? I can't tell you all that right now. We had a conference call with the Lieutenant Governor the other night, and it was all the chairmen, and good discussions. We don't have a way forward. Each one of us was given the ability to voice our opinion. I am, again, out of my family, 3 of the 4 of us have had it. You know, I'm of the opinion, you know, I'm ready to open up. I'm ready to open up Texas. I'm ready to open up our businesses. I think we've all learned a lot. People know that they should wear masks when they're in big groups, or, you know, stay, you know, as far away as you can from them. I've noticed behavioral changes, and I think it's for the good. And so I'm hoping that we have some way to have visitation. And I see in the chat box, and we'll get to those questions, because I do want to talk about vaccines and things like that. A couple of other things that I wanted to hit on that come out of Fort Bend County and some of the focuses that I had last session. Before I get to that, I do have to mention this. Childcare has been a big issue in Fort Bend County. We have received tons of phone calls about childcare. And so once give y'all this update, Texas Workforce Commission has approved the use of $200 million of the $371 million from the CARES Act. And on August the 20th, TWC approved the use of additional $106.4 million. This funding is so far has been used to address the following: $100 million to support children of essential workers, and then $100 million to help stabilize providers by enhancing reimbursement rates and paying them based on subsidy enrollment rather than attendance, and covering the parent share of cost, and providing stabilization grants. The reason this is so important: you can't go back to work if you can't have safe and trusted care of your children. And so that this has been something that we've heard a lot about and have advocated for greatly. So a couple of things that came out of Fort Bend County that I worked on last session. Mental health is always a big issue. I've been working with Texana and all of the local mental health authorities across my district last session, and more important than ever, mental health, because we see a lot of our constituents struggling with that. Last session, I passed Senate Bill 633, which is all Texans access, is what I kind of deemed it as, and HHSC is doing a nice job of doing this. Just the bill summary on that is, one of the things that we do pretty well is that wherever the LMHA is, they do pretty good in those big cities, but they don't do very well in the surrounding communities. And like Texana has a number of the surrounding counties that I deal with: Austin County, Wharton County. And so this bill is going to help them develop and coordinate local policy, and working with the 39 LMHAs. We have a goal to not only increase capacity, but also promote broader regional planning instead of being siloed, utilizing beds in different regions and being able to work together. And so I'm really excited about the progress of that bill. It's really a planning bill, but it's going to help us in the future. And then another bill that I'm really, really, really proud of is Senate Bill 750, which is what we call the Healthy Texas Women Plus. And this bill passed unanimously in both chambers. But this legislation, it directed HHSC to evaluate postpartum care services provided to women that are enrolled in our Healthy Texas Women, which is a state insurance program. And we had only done it, we only provided that health for the first 60 days. This was to extend that health. And so starting on September the 1st, they've done a big announcement that we're going to add additional physical and behavioral health services that address things such as asthma, diabetes, hypertension, certain cardiovascular conditions, perinatal mental health conditions, including postpartum depression, and substance abuse disorders, including drug, alcohol, and tobacco use. That's a really big step forward in what we see in some of our mortality issues with postpartum women. So that's something that had really risen to the forefront, not just in our district, but statewide and nationwide. And so we went in this last session, tried to address those issues. Something I can't help but mention is our school districts. So I want to get into that very quickly, that of the 70 school districts that I represent, We have, I believe everyone is now face-to-face except for Katy, Fort Bend, Victoria ISD, and Aransas County ISD. And I think Aransas County starts this week. So Victoria starts September the 8th. Katy ISD starts September the 8th. And so everybody has a start date except for Fort Bend ISD. And I know Lamar Consolidated ISD is the largest school district that I represent that had started face-to-face teaching. It looks like about 55% online and 45% face-to-face. In all of my other districts, and I've talked to a lot of the superintendents and school board presidents, it's somewhere between 85 and 95% of attendance face-to-face. So very positive out there. There's been a few cases here and there. Each school district has handled it in their own way. There is a lot of mitigation effort going on. Of course, I have a senior in high school, and he went back on, September 25th. And so we are, and I will just tell you as a parent, I'm not speaking as a state senator, it was one of the most positive things for us. Jake really struggled being remote instruction last year during the spring. I have had parents stop me far and wide and say, I want my child in school. I really think that it's important for their mental health, for their involvement. And so I'm very pleased with the progress that our school districts are making, our teachers and their commitment and what they're doing. And I'm hopeful that Fort Bend ISD will also open soon. So of my 70 school districts, all will be open on September 8th, except for one. So good positive way forward on that forefront. Looking at other things that I wanted to mention, which is, let's see, I know that TEA has come out with a lot of the different assistance that we're trying to give our school districts, and there's going to be some hold harmless on ADA. We're monitoring in some of those big school districts, the struggle that we see with potentially not knowing where some kids are, and if they're truly didn't do any distance learning last spring. So there is some concern, but doing the very best that we can. The CARES funding that we utilized for public education, I hear it from ISDs that there was a little bit of a swap, and we're working through that on some of the costs and making sure costs are reimbursed. The state did put together $400 million in reimbursement, e-learning devices and hotspots, another $200 million, and then PPE, $47 million. That's good, but I've heard from some ISDs that they're out of PPE pretty quickly, and so they're continuing to purchase those. And so there's a lot of work that we'll continue to be doing with our public education systems. Looking at higher education in and around Fort Bend County, the CARES Act gave a lot of money to our higher ed education systems. Houston Community College received $30.2 million in CARES funding for COVID expenses. It looks like classes began on August the 24th, but they're remote for the first 6 weeks. Wharton County Junior College received $3.3 million in CARES Act. Their class is a hybrid, began August 31st, so some students are in person. University of Houston Sugar Land received $39.5 million from the CARES Act for COVID expenses, and they have in-class and remote instruction beginning August 24th. TSTC, good old TSTC, received $10.6 million in CARES Act funding, and they returned to class, to in-class instruction back in the summer. So they've, so many of their classes you can't teach remotely, it's hands-on. Couple other things that I wanted to cover before I take questions. Big question always since Harvey has been flood mitigation. And certainly Hurricane Laura was a great reminder. I'm grateful to the good Lord for the wobble. I'm sorry for Louisiana, but 20 or 30 miles to the west and Texas would have been really a bullseye. So we avoided that, but we know that hurricanes, it's not if it's going to happen again, it is when. So Harvey mitigation funds, this is really from FEMA, but it's being implemented by the General Land Office. And it's a big deal for Senate District 18, from Fort Bend County and a sliver of Harris County all the way down to Port Aransas, all 21 counties. There's going to be a total of $4.2 billion in federal funds, and these are grants. There is no local match. And so that's music to all of our ears. The first round will be $1.1 billion in mitigation competition funds. And those applications are due on October the 28th. So it's really, this is prime time. One of the problems with this first round is that the federal requirements are heavy emphasis on moderate to low income. So it's going to benefit some areas and not benefit others. And so our office has been in great discussions with the Land Commission and the Deputy Land Commissioner about how all of our area can be addressed. And we believe that the second round will have less emphasis on mod to low income service projects, so that we can get all of Fort Bend covered for what they need. And we know that it comes in a number of ways of what we saw in the floods in the Brazos River, and its erosion is real, and in trying to mitigate that for the future. So we've worked with a lot of mayors in Fort Bend County and outside of Fort Bend County on this, and we're going to continue to work with them. Last session, when I said it was a very successful session, the heart and soul of Harvey recovery was Senate Bills 6, 7, and 8. I was the author of Senate Bill 6. And I like to call that the how-to model. It really did a disaster response model guide and training, and then it did a debris management and disposal part of the bill. And then I got to tell y'all something. We as a state are looked at as maybe probably the best in our response to natural disasters. But the reason it is because we've always taken lessons learned and we've gotten better about it. And we've talked a lot. I've talked with Governor Patrick and others about the need to take lessons learned from this pandemic and not wait 102 years for the next one, because I don't think the next pandemic is going to be in 102 years. I mean, we saw H1N1 in 2009. I think we just really got lucky that it did not, that pandemic, we were able to mitigate it with some of the pharmaceuticals that we currently have. And it also was not harsh on the elderly population. And there's a lot of hypotheses why the flu of 57 and 58 is believed that our elderly people had some resistance to H1N1. And so I just have to say we were blessed that 2009, that influenza just did not attack elderly people like we see with COVID-19. So I want us to go into the next session. And like I said, the focus should be on our response to a health crisis, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. Some of you on this call would argue that there's too much authority in certain areas. I've heard from a lot of constituents on both sides of this. And so I think a balanced approach of lessons learned like we did after Hurricane Harvey. A couple other mentions, Senate Bill 7 creates two important funds in our state treasury. One is the Flood Infrastructure Fund, the FIF, the fifth. And the other one is the Texas Infrastructure Resilience Fund, which we call the TURF. Both will be administered by the Texas Water Development Board. You're going to see more about these in the years to come because there's a lot of planning. But Senate Bill 7 allows, we allowed the Texas Water Development Board to issue revenue bonds to provide funds for both of these. And out of the rainy day fund, we appropriated $793 million to the fifth, and that's for future mitigation projects. And we also put $857 million into the TURF. And that is going to be used for when we have the need to have a federal match, helping our local communities with the federal match. So both really, really big deals. Senate Bill 8 is a flood plan, much like our water plan that Senate Bill 2 back in the 90s set up. There's some long projections on when that, September 1, 2024, the Texas Water Development Board completes the state flood plan. But it's really important because for the first time on floods, we're not using political boundaries. We're actually going to be looking at flood planning in watersheds. And as you all know, if you experience Hurricane Harvey, it's a watershed. Where did all of that water, come from, and where did it all go? And so it's going to divide the state up into regional flood planning groups. You're going to see a lot of that, and you would have seen more of it right now had it not been for the pandemic. So three very important bills. I was honored to be the author of Senate Bill 6, and but 7 and 8, long-term floods, flood funding and planning. Finally, to hit on transportation, always a huge issue in Fort Bend County. We've had some wins, and we've had a couple of disappointments, but overall, we have more funding. I will say that the economic recession does threaten some of our funding for highways in the future, and so we have to keep a keen eye on that. Things that affect your transportation funding are things like oil production taxes that are down 16%. We certainly know that because we're part of the energy sector in Fort Bend County. Natural gas production taxes are down 45%. Motor fuel taxes are down 9.4%. Motor vehicle sales in Texas are down 4%. And so, it's a pretty tough time, but we're hoping that we'll recover. I'm working with Commissioner Myers and Fort Bend legislators to advocate the priority of widening State Highway 99. So I led the Fort Bend County delegation, and we had everyone sign on to it, that we sent a letter to the Transportation Commission to prioritize money for this vital project for the region. Just on August the 27th, so I guess that was last week, they modified their UTP, which is the Unified Transportation Plan, and this is what I'm talking about, some wins and losses, so I'll give you all some of these numbers. We got $133 million to widen the Katy Freeway in Fort Bend County, $35 million to widen US 90A in Fort Bend County, $110 million to widen FM 723 in our county, $84.8 million to widen FM 1463 in Fort Bend County. Unfortunately, I did not see the money that I wanted to for 99, but alas, it's not over. We'll keep working on that because 99 is extremely important in that as a major corridor in Fort Bend County. And then finally, I know I've mentioned the CARES Act. There is a lot of money in the CARES Act, and some of it's gone to very good use. There were only 18 jurisdictions in the state of Texas that received their money directly. Fort Bend County, as a county, was one of those. They received $141.6 million directly. None of our cities in Fort Bend County, like Sugar Land, received their money directly. They had to apply to it to the state, and it came in the form of a much lesser amount. That is not something that I got to make a decision on, and I really have expressed my disappointment in that. But I'm happy for Fort Bend, the county, who received nearly $142 million directly, but our cities that weren't of 500,000 or more did not. And so, certainly I have some economic envy with some of the larger cities that I think our cities could have really used those dollars, but I'm hoping that we'll continue to apply for those dollars and put them to good use. Of all the CARES Act funding, you know, I have to tell you that the legislature has very little to do with that. Y'all know that we haven't been in session. There was no lawmaker that was named to the task force. And so I beg y'all to stay very involved with your local government on you know, how the money is being used, and engage yourself and make sure that those monies are going in the directions that you want, and that are the priorities for the county. You know, you can detect a little frustration. Some of the things, you know, I certainly agree with some of the things that we've done as a state. Some maybe not, but that's what's healthy about the legislature, the legislative branch versus the executive branch versus the judicial branch. And that's how our founding fathers saw it. I'm anxious to start having hearings. We haven't had hearings since the pandemic. That bothers me greatly. I think that there is going to be a way forward where we start having hearings and public input. But our office is always available for public input from you. As I say, I think at last count, we were over 4,000 emails and letters that we had responded to, and that doesn't count the number of phone calls and other communication that we've tried to stay engaged with. So with that, Mr. Breaux, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Senator. We got we have a number of questions. We won't be able to get to all of these, but you know, getting back to the $141 million that Fort Bend County received directly, that represented about 45% of the total amount allocated to the county. It appears there's $173 million still at the state. I guess it's being, for lack of a better word, controlled by the governor's office. When do you think the governor's office is going to come up with a methodology or process for releasing those funds?
Well, and if you're talking about the cities and how they apply for it, you know, they got, oh gosh, I can't remember the percentage, but I think it is, they, you know, if you just applied, you got automatically 20%, and then you can continue to apply for those. And I'm not exactly sure what the methodology is going to be, but I'm always encouraging my cities to do that and to apply for those dollars, because they're really set up to go to those cities. And so there was a work group, I wasn't on it, that worked on this to try to ascertain what the dollars were and what the COVID expenses are going to be. And I think that the COVID expenses are going to be large, and I'm going to work with my cities. But I agree with you that we need to be able to, when there's expenses out there, we need to push it out to those cities so that it doesn't end up falling on the local taxpayers when that money was appropriated by U.S. Congress. It's not an easy answer, I will tell you that. I saw one, and it was one of the first questions. What is the latest on when we could expect a vaccine? I want to address that. I've had, as a work group, I'm not a chairman, I'm a work group leader, and as a workforce leader of a group of 5 senators, we've had presentations from pharmaceuticals, and we're very interested in, you know, we've heard from AstraZeneca. Hold on a second. I've heard from so many. I'm going to just say in a blanket, I think that we could have results in October. I was very encouraged to know that some of the things that we've done, when you start thinking about vaccines, you have to have vials. One of the pharmaceutical companies that I was talking with and have had several conference calls, they already have 300 million vials. They already have the base solution. So we've learned a lot about having the supply chain. And so I'm very optimistic that we may potentially have more than one vaccine readily available very, very, very soon. Now, the efficacy, those are going to be personal decisions. Someone asked me, well, how come you're speeding it up? And I got a great answer from the experts. We're now sharing data real time with the FDA. In the past, when you were working on vaccines, you would do all your trials, then you would, you know, compile it, turn it in, then they would have months to review it, send it back and forth. The FDA is seeing the same information that the pharmaceutical company is having. And they say it has really, it's changed everything. It's a game changer for our future. So I'm optimistic about that.
Senator, and to the folks out here, we're going to go a little bit past 1 o'clock. Just got a couple more questions, and we're going to, if someone has to sign off here. Capitol shut down. Talked about having hearings. How do we think those hearings are going to happen? Virtual, in person?
No, I'm glad that question was asked. There is no way to have a virtual hearing. It's not allowed for in the Senate rules. And so you cannot amend Senate rules without being in session, and we're not in session. And you can't go back to session unless the governor calls you back to session. And so there are no virtual hearings. So here's how, when we go back, there will be invited testimony. Of course, we do, you know, it's covered, y'all watch us during the legislature. And so there'll be invited testimony. And when I'm given the opportunity to chair Health and Human, I'm gonna encourage everyone to, you know, give them a time period to be able to mail in their public testimony. But just right now, with where we are with COVID-19 and the riots that we've seen in and around the Capitol, that's how it's going to be produced. So that's why we can't have hearings right now, is we are prohibited from doing virtual committee hearings.
Senator, the Sunset Commission I guess missed the meeting in August. What are the plans for them meeting again? What does that mean?
I'm optimistic that's going to happen in September. I'm not on the Sunset Commission, but you know, I hear the chatter, and I'm hoping that this month you'll start to see some real activity. You know, I was the last holdout. I had a hearing that was set for September 9th, and I just wouldn't pull it down because I remain the eternal optimist. But I know the Capitol's not going to be ready to be open by September 9th. So I was the last person standing, but I am optimistic about the Sunset Commission being able to start to have hearings very soon.
Okay.
I'm looking at all of these questions really fast. You see anything else, Chris, that stands out?
There was an issue, and I don't know exactly how to address it, but you know, you got folks who are being called back to work. Maybe they've got some comorbidity issues with it, and they're quite frankly afraid to go back to work. Mm-hmm. What do we do? What do we do with them from an unemployment standpoint?
Yeah, you know, it depends on your employer, and I'm very sensitive to that. You know, I'm hoping that employers work with those that do have comorbidity. The science absolutely supports that there are just some that are, are going to struggle more with coronavirus if they get it. And so I would just say, please work with your local employer. And so, you know, I think that the effort to get people back in employment, some jobs you can do face-to-face, and some you can do like we're doing right now virtually. So I would encourage them to work with their employers. We're going to see a lot of things change after this. I see that I think Grail said Fort Bend ISD last night, and I had just gotten an update on that, as to phase into full face-to-face by October the 12th. So the board will consider this plan next week at a special called meeting. So that's good. So, you know, I'm very anxious. I'm really proud of our school districts for offering both. I've heard teachers, you know, they're doing face-to-face, and then they have to do their distance learning as well. It's a lot of effort and giving parents a choice, but I think that's the right thing to do. And I will just tell you that I've had nothing but, as a mother, Jake's personality has literally changed since having like a schedule and something to do and to get up. He has to be at school by 7 in the morning, and it's just been great. I'm one of those that I think that the mental health aspect is very important for our young people in getting back to school.
Well, thank you, Senator, for joining us today. I see by your answering the questions on the question line. You're a Zoom pro, and we appreciate you.
Well, I'm so excited to have done this, and I want to thank you, Chris, and certainly Carrie and her team. We delayed this a week because of Hurricane Laura, and I was also supposed to be in Fort Bend County that Thursday night with a group last Thursday night, and I was like, shoot, man, I'll be there if you want to have the meeting, but we just didn't know which way that was going to go, and the amount of rain. And again, to our friends and partners in Louisiana, we're so sorry, and I am grateful that we do have problems certainly in Southeast Texas, but I'm getting reports that things are going very well. I'm glad that the president was able to come this last weekend. In talking to Governor Patrick, they had some very good meetings about the needs of Texas. And so aside from the coronavirus, there are, and I know with our sponsors, thank you to the sponsors today. Thank you for all of you being involved in your Chamber of Commerce. I love Chambers of Commerce. They are the voice, the unified voice of our businesses. And so with some of our sponsors before we went online today, we were talking about some technicalities of hospital funding and those things that we're very engaged with in Washington, D.C. right now. And so there's a lot. There isn't a moment that we're not working on something. And so I got a text message from Mayor Zimmerman, and he and I were talking about different things on the budget. So howdy to all of our elected officials out there. I just want you to know they're rock stars. I love working with them. They text me, they call me, and we don't always agree on everything. I mean, we have some lively conversations. I'll tell y'all, Joe Zimmerman, I don't know if y'all know him very well, but he can argue a little bit, and that's what I love. He and I argue back and forth, and then we come out with a pretty good outcome. And so I think we've seen a lot of that behind the scenes, me with other senators, me with statewide elected officials, being able to give our opinions and fight for what we think is best for our districts and fight for what we think is best for the people we represent. And so please encourage, if y'all have other things, email us. Let us know, and we're going to be working on those kind of things. Again, shout out to Allison Brock and Grant McLaughlin, who is our new general counsel. They're both listening in today, and I know, like Allison talking to me about the gentleman who's about to be evicted from his apartment. We feel and live those emotions with our constituents, and we're going to do the very best to help everybody. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here today, and thank you to all our generous sponsors. Thank you guys for hanging in there. I know we went a little bit over time. This video will also be on our Facebook page. It was recorded live. This will conclude today.